I also took the opportunity to become the BAME Network's communications and marketing officer as well, because there is a need within the NHS regarding
tell us
race.
a bit more about that. And I didn't want to interrupt. I do apologise, but what made you take that up? And you just said there's a need for someone to represent the BAME community at NHS. Can you tell us a bit more about that as to why? What's going on? Or what prompted you?
Communications is something that I have always been involved in, whether it been on a semi-pro or amateur level, working in drama or writing scripts. However, when you go into a large organisation like the NHS and say, I want to get into communications, it's not as straightforward as that, because their comms are structured and in-house, and it doesn't involve necessarily community work. It does involve information that probably stems from local government. Okay. So it's key to have knowledge of local government if you say you want to get into communications or be part of their team within the NHS. Maybe, let's say, 5-6 years down the line, issues started to arise when there was what is known as the Work Relations Equality Standards report that came out, which said, in a nutshell, that the NHS employs more whites and blacks into certain positions. Right, okay. And then that started the ball rolling in many, within many angles. Okay. And, there was a need to start up a committee. And that's a role for, and then role for communications came up. And for those listeners that don't know, the NHS, is it National Health Service it stands for? Yes. And it's actually the biggest employer in Europe, or is it the world? I'll say Europe to begin with. I'm not sure whether America's NHS is any bigger or... That's true. If we're big, then they are bigger, aren't they? Yeah, of course. America's... everything's big. But NHS employs, its biggest employer in Europe, and it's our National Health Service over here in the UK. So, okay, so you're doing that, but... also, so you mentioned you've got a show, Jennifer Valentine Miller show as well. Is there anything else that you're working on? Apart from my media platform, which stems from various blogs, and that houses my Twitter page and Facebook page, that has to be updated regularly, I guess, if you want to be seen as active and relevant. Yeah, absolutely. And that just comes from work, current interests, and whatever the sphere is that I have within that sort of media platform. Okay, and what would you say is the main focus of your blogs, or that platform to various blogs? Do you have one, or do you have multiple topics that you touch on? It started off with health and well-being. Okay. From a spiritual sense, as well as health and well-being, full stop. And a mental health matter, and then a relationship matter that was blogged, and my relationship with the church. Yeah. The church I'm in, is it at the top of the hill, or do you think it's, so it just stems from things like that. Okay. And the result of that, I just compiled that together and produced a publication in 2012 called The Words Press, just short biography, which is still available on Amazon, even though it was produced in 2012, and it's still relevant as well. So that's how, I started that, and then I produce something else out of it. Right, okay. So then it grew into some other things. So if we just, before we talk in a bit more detail around the blogs and the topics that you cover, and where your passion lies, if we just go back, so when did you give your life to Christ, and did that coincide with when you started writing? Tell us about that journey. I gave my life to Christ when I'd probably left the BBC, so I was involved in media maybe some years prior to my giving my life or recommitting myself to Christianity. Not Christian plays, but there were plays of relevance, especially if it's for the BBC. Yeah. I was born into Catholicism. Okay. And I'm not going to condemn my parents for sort of making that decision upon my life. And when I was witnessed to by an evangelist, I was invited to a play, of all things, called Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames, and that was over at Kensington Temple.
Okay.
And that's why I made a commitment with my sister, who was with me as well, and went forward and said, yeah, I like this. And so I just sort of went along with it. I mean, the play really did it for me.
Yeah.
And again, it so had to be a play that really did it for me.
Because
that was that. And the rest, obviously, wasn't all about plays. It was about reality.
Yeah, of course.
Being brought down to earth of who I am and what baggage I was carrying, and the age that I gave my life to Lord. I wasn't really at the age where, you know, a youth person would want to marry you. So you have to make sure that you go in there with the right mindset when you make a commitment, especially into an independent church or Pentecostal church.
Yeah.
So there was all that going on, and you can imagine that's not.
Yeah, I was going to say that must have been difficult with the family because Catholicism versus
absolutely yes, a lot of family did sort of say parents would be upset. I mean, both parents. No, my mother had passed away in 86, but my dad was still around. However, he accepted it. He wasn't too perturbed at the fact that I sort of crossed over. I wasn't becoming a Muslim. I still believed in Jesus, but not necessarily Mary. As much, though I do revere her very highly, but not the one that I pray to.
Okay. All right, and that's interesting. So then, was it shortly after that you started your blogging, or
no,
where did that come from?
Blogging came when I thought to myself, now if I want to start moving on from administrative work, you've got to go into higher education. So it's when I went into higher education,
right,
and I started learning the patterns of dissertations.
Yeah,
and I was finding that difficult.
Okay.
And the principal of the university said, well, try writing a book and see how easy that is, then come back to do your dissertation. So that's how the format came about.
Okay.
For my higher education degree.
Okay, that's interesting. But then you're also, this is I find this very, because I don't know much about it, but then you're also into public relations as well.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so you're registered, chartered?
Chartered, right? Yes. I stepped out. It's not common to see someone who's working in an administrative position within the NHS with a couple of letters behind after their names, but it's something I had to do.
Yeah.
It's just something I'm very glad that I've done.
Okay.
Because, somebody professional would look at that and say, yeah, okay, let's pick her from somebody who charges £500 an hour, because I'm a non-for-profit person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So there's a lot of essentially, I call it charitable work for lack of a better expression, but there's a lot that you're involved in from that side. So even in terms of I know the church doesn't seem to have much of a PR. Do you feel like the church needs that? Does the church need representation in that area?
It does. Let's say ever since what we 2013, when the Reformation of Marriage came in.
Yeah.
I think it does need PR, because not every church is going to go down that road of accepting, not necessarily somebody who's gay, the Reformation of the Marriage bill.
Yeah.
So they need the PR, not to say they're good, but it's not me. I'm answerable to somebody else, and that's what needs to be got across.
Right. Okay.
From PR perspective.
Yeah, and I feel that
too.
When a lot of church leaders, whenever they step into the public eye in these kind of situations, they seem to kind of have to flip-flop around the answer to the questions and things like that. And I did think to myself, are they the best people to represent themselves or the church? Because it doesn't matter if you're in charge. I mean, I was in a plane once, and there was a guy there that is head of public relations for the Central Bank of Germany, and I was saying, well, why doesn't the CEO represent himself? And they said, well, they know what they do, but they don't always know the best way to put it across. And I'm feeling that might be the same situation in what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for example, my pastor would not need me to speak on his behalf. He'd probably need me just to prompt him with this.
Yeah.
As far as the public is concerned.
Right.
And that he'll accept.
Yeah.
And that will he run with.
Okay.
PRs don't. We're not spokespersons. We don't like the Prime Minister. We don't write their scripts for them. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's interesting. And then, so even in terms of the world systems, right? And this is something that we spoke about. And where do you think Christianity fits into that? Because we're talking about, we're talking about representation for the BAME Society. We're talking about PR for the church as well. When it comes to anything to do with the law, like the lawmakers, whether it's politicians or judges and things like that, do you feel there's a place in those areas for Christians to represent? Well, not just representing Christians, but also representing the BAME community as well.
I'm not here to judge. And when you talk about the world system, I know we live in the world, but we're not of the world.
Yeah.
And I had to be directed to 1 John and the epistles or letters that he wrote in Ephesus. I mean, his interpretation is about greed and power, promiscuous lifestyle, adulterous behaviour and abortions. If that is an individual's choice, that is their choice. But the thing is we're assuming that Christians would be exempt from that. Mm-hmm. And if they are exempt from that, then they are good employers. Or good employees, I should say.
Yeah.
Every employee would want to, employ somebody who hasn't got a drink problem, who doesn't always ask for a pay rise every month. So, and funny enough, early on during the day, there was, our pastors, inducted some elders.
Yeah.
And from that, he did quote that the church would like someone who's not a heavy drinker, who's not a lover of money. And that is what, in Timothy, the qualities of an elder. Uh-huh. And I think that type of person would be a great individual for anyone. Yeah. So, I can't knock my sisters who've got OBEs. I mean, I'm not going to ask them, what do you have to do? I'm assuming they just had to labour for it. Yeah. And that is it. It's all about work, isn't it? Right. And we can't get away from that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I know
that's just me. I'm not sure what you were thinking of when you asked that.
Well,
that question.
I think it's a situation where I think we're coming closer and closer to a point where to be recognised in just general. I'm calling it the world system, but to be recognised on the world stage, should I say, it becomes more difficult for a Christian because the world is accepting things that, as Christians, we tend not to accept. So, does it mean that now we have a divide, or is there a way that we can still, essentially be great employees, but also carry the word of God with us?
Well, we can only but ask those who've been there, who are probably either still there or who've stumbled, and just find out from them. And Cliff Richard is supposed to be one of our great advocates within the community, however, Christian community. However, there's a cloud hovering over him. Yeah. I think the word compromise then becomes a bit more of a sticking one, because then you think, okay, how much do you let go? How much do you support, really? But it's interesting because this comes across your world a bit more than my own. So that's pretty good. But then if your wife was to receive an honour in the New Year's honours list, and she's in social services. I mean, what are we to assume? But she's worked hard for it. She doesn't necessarily has done anything. I mean, I know that you have to socialise. You have to socialise to get drunk. I'm not assuming that she's crossed any boundaries. Yeah. I don't know. I'm a Christian, but I know that if I'm going to have to move from where I am, then I've got to really move with our greatest competitors, which are not Christians. They're non-Christians. That's
true. And I suppose the next question is that, how do you make an impact? And it would be to make sure that you move, because then if you're not there and then there are no Christians there, then where will the impact come from? That's the question that I have.
Not to labour in vain. Yeah. There is work, and there is work that is productive, and there is work that is from God, and with faith, you never know.
Yeah.
It could be like to somebody. It could change somebody's life, like a health worker can, does that. So, I could be a surgeon who's a Christian who's giving somebody life. So
there's so many ways.
There's so many ways.
Yeah. All right, I do want to touch on, because I know that we're going to have to get some information from you and how people can contact you and any events coming up, and I want you to repeat your time on the your show so the listeners know that. But just before we go there, you're also into the sports scene, aren't you?
Yes, I'm into the sports scene as a sports chaplain. I like sports.
Yeah. Do you have a favourite?
I cannot say. I mean, football's the thing at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you which team I support.
That was the next question.
There's Old Trafford around the studio, so I'm a Londoner, so I support a London club, and it happens to be, Arsenal Football Club, simply because they sponsored me as a very young person many years ago during heightened, racial tensions when they stepped out.
Yeah.
So that's why, and they're fun.
Yeah,
they give us something to talk about, don't they? But then again, I come from a family of cricketers.
Oh, right. Okay.
The post-Windrush generation, and obviously, as I say, back in the day, I was involved in sports. So yes, becoming a sports chaplain was a good thing to do, I think. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yes. Okay. Right. Do you have your fingers in any other pies?
Do I have? I can't. I'm sure there is something, but it's not as transparent as the ones I've mentioned.
That you've spoken about.
I've spoken about. Yes.
Okay. All right. So, if any of our listeners want to get in contact with you to understand a bit more about your story or to ask your advice on anything you've spoken about today, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can visit me at www.healingrelationstv.co.uk, and that will take you to my PR platform as well.
Okay.
And you could also see copies, the top page of my book, Words Pressed, a short biography. That's on one of the pages as well, one of the home pages.
And that Words Pressed, a short biography book is still available on Amazon.
It is, right? And on Kindle as well if you want to download it for free.
Okay, perfect.
And contact healingrelationstv.co.uk.
Healing Relations TV.
That's for an email address. And you can contact me. If you want my email, that's contact at healingrelationstv.co.uk. I don't do a live show, unfortunately. If not, I'd be giving out a mobile number. I know some of our hosts have making themselves very busy.
No, that's absolutely fine. And please remind the listeners about when your show on PRZFM is.
Every first and third Saturday.
Okay, and what time?
Of the month. 9, around about 9 o'clock to 9:30.
Okay.
And it's full of, I do maybe a 10-minute talk, and then it's followed by some animation or a video or something. So it's not me on full-on talking. I try to involve relevant media around what I say to make it a bit more interesting.
Okay, good. Well, thank you so much for coming into the studio today. I don't even think an hour is enough to really pick at your brain, because you got a lot of experience, you got a lot going on. But I hope that even in this short time, the listeners have been able to grasp an overview of what you're into and what you do. And I have to say that, even speaking on behalf of them, we're very impressed. You got a lot going on, a world of knowledge, and we look forward to tuning into your show and reading your book. Actually,
I hope so too, and I hope you enjoy it and the show.